Are ya ready, kids?
Hello, it's Employee a Million, and welcome back to SpongeComs. Today's episodes are Season 2, Episode 2, 22 overall, lots of twos, Something Smells and Bossy Boots, both of which originally aired on October 26th, 2000. These were the season premieres, and coincidentally enough, they also premiered on the week that Crybaby Lane aired, so yeah, pretty spooky time period if you're into, like, Nick history. And it was also the day that the PlayStation 2 launched in North America, so Toto, I don't think we're in a retro world anymore. So anyway, this first episode, Something Smells. It was written by Aaron Springer, C.H. Greenblatt, and Meriwether Williams. Sorry for messing that up. They are essentially a power trio in my mind. They made 12 episodes together, or at least wrote them together, and they are some of my favorites. And it says a lot that this first one, Something Smells, is the one that I like the least. However, I still respect it, and I get why it is relatively popular for a SpongeBob episode. So, this episode is about gross stuff. I wouldn't call this Sunday the grossest thing in the world, but guess it didn't need to be. I mean, mustard, peanuts, what else? Onions? Sorry, ketchup, peanuts, and onions. Not the grossest thing ever, but hey, mix the three together and you get something almost as bad as onion ice cream, which was their original idea. SpongeBob was going to have an actual sundae, and he was gonna get some onion ice cream for it, which would have been the worst flavor of all and given him his horrible halitosis. Where did I learn that information? From secondhand sources of the DVD commentary for Season 2, which I've heard through the grapevine. Also, those commentaries aren't very good, which was part of the reason I wanted to do SpongeComs, just make some commentaries I thought would be alright for SpongeBob and talk more about how we see it today, as opposed to when these episodes were still relatively new, because the Season 2 DVD came out in 2004, and it was fine for the time. Like, the commentaries weren't horrible, so I've heard. However, the coloring issues do get worse and worse as the season goes on the DVD, and there were a lot of things at the time that they couldn't say for some reason or another. And of course, SpongeBob has a larger legacy today than it did in 2004, so there isn't much to really go off of at the time. But still, it's one of the most valuable sets from that era, and I just wanted to get my piece on it out right now. Also, someone just transitioned there, and good for them. So anyway, what was I on about? Yeah, gross out episodes in SpongeBob. They get a pretty bad rep. I mean, the Splinter is still probably the most hated episode of the whole series, and To Love a Patty, Fungus Among Us, Face Freeze, they're not far off. However, they can work sometimes, and this is one of those sometimes where people really don't mind the whole bad breath angle, because aside from the breathy sound effect that they sometimes use, there's nothing particularly foul about it. It's just a green puff of air. And even then, I would have preferred if they did it a little more cleaner, a little faster. But still, not a horrible decision, especially if they had to do a story like this. And hey, what they worked out well. Oh, and this little scene right here, SpongeBob is meant to say, "Hi, building," and then it goes away, but instead they taped over it for the DVD, and a lot of international airings. Like, you're gonna be very hard-pressed to find that original clip, "Hi, building." Also, that SpongeBob laugh is probably one of the more iconic ones. It's very easy to find sound bites of that one. And when Patrick says, "Maybe it's the way you dress," a little part of that maybe is used as a soundbite for Sans in the popular video game series Undertale. It took a while for people to actually find out that it was actually that sound clip, but when they did, oh man. Personally, I've never played Undertale, but I can kind of get it. I can kind of get the popularity. But yeah, maybe playing Megalomania and posting Sans memes everywhere has done a bit of a number on it. Hey, at least SpongeBob fans, we have 1,000 different jokes to work off of. Not to go fandom superiority here, just making a little observation. Another thing about Patrick in this episode is that his design is pretty much perfected. I mean, this is exactly how we expect Patrick to look, and also more or less how we expect him to behave. I'd say that this is the first flawless portrayal of Patrick. He's not too callous, he's not too dumb. He means well, but he can say weird things on occasion. That's the incarnation of Patrick that I and many others like the most. And there were hints of it at points in Season 1, but 2 and 3 were a variable golden age of Patrick, and it's because of scenes like this, the old ugly barnacle talk. The story is just so simple, but it stuck with us for some reason. I can't really, offer a scientific explanation for exactly why it stuck with people. It's just comedy. It's not meant to be hyperanalyzed, which is why I'm doing commentary tracks for every episode. And it was so popular that I remember TV Tropes had their own set of trope pages just for that little joke, pretending like it was an actual story, an actual tale. I hope TV Tropes still has that. I remember when it was fun. But anyway, this whole angle about Patrick getting SpongeBob to admit that he's ugly and he's proud, it's this whole self-worth, self-acceptance thing. It's kind of a parody of that sort of thing, but it's also played a bit earnestly because at this point, SpongeBob doesn't know that people are running away from him because he has bad breath. Exactly how long he has this bad breath, I can't tell. Maybe until tomorrow when he brushes his teeth again. Peh. But this whole thing with SpongeBob being ugly and proud of it, it's in good taste, more or less. It's about people can be, empowered by this in a way, even if it's kind of poking fun at this self-discovery stuff. Oh, and here we have the reef. We don't usually go here. We went here in fun and Wigstruck, I think. But overall, they don't go to the movies all too often, so this is kind of a unique location for SpongeBob. And it kind of makes the scene a little more awkward because you've got this fancy music playing in the background, you've got a lot of people focused on this other area. You've still got the duh guy, that's a good meme. But yeah, I guess that's part of the intention of this scene, that you've got this really casual place you can go, and this is where a lot of destruction occurs. I'm not the hugest fan of this ending, this big climax in the theater. What movie are they watching anyway? I can't tell. Cartoon logic and all, but exactly how powerful is SpongeBob's breath by the end of this? I can't tell. Is it so powerful that it knocks everyone out? We see someone still in the bathroom. Who knows? But you know what? I think my favorite thing about this ending is that SpongeBob finally does get a taste or a sniff of his own medicine. Don't know exactly why he was carrying it all around. That seems very contrived, I'd say. And I don't know why he can't smell it immediately after this. However, I am totally okay with him discovering that Patrick can also have bad breath and that it hurts. I don't know exactly what I'm saying anymore, but I hope you get what I mean. You know that I like SpongeBob discovering this instead of being a clueless moron about it for the whole thing. And also, another thing about this ending is that I think that this was also kind of a fun little beta test for floor tiles and like mirroring actions and animations on a glass floor in this bathroom. They did it before in SB129. That's the easiest example I can think of. But that was done on cells, so you needed two different, or in SpongeBob's case, 6 different SpongeBobs for that scene to work and look good. Here, they could just flip the file they had for whatever SpongeBob was doing, and it will work. And also a little thing about this episode's ending that also makes it feel a little more incomplete than it should. Patrick kind of mentions his sister and how he doesn't have one. He's a very forgetful fellow. He'll have a sister again in 10 years. Anyway, that thing about the ending is that they come across Squidward for a bit, and you expect him to say something, but he doesn't. In the commentary, which this is like maybe the second or third actual thing that they say in the commentary, is that Squidward was meant to have this sort of quip. I can't remember exactly what it is, I don't have it in my notes, but it might have been ugly and they stink. 2 for 1. That sort of thing. But overall, this is a pretty solid episode. It's pretty dang funny for the subject matter that they chose, and I don't have too many problems with it. If nothing else, it gave us the ugly barnacle, and that is something that should not be taken away. Bossy Boots was written by Walt Dawn, Paul Tibbett, and Mr. Lawrence. I should have mentioned that Walt Dawn was one of those new guys in the production staff for Season 2. Doesn't have too much of a bearing on this episode, but maybe you can feel some of his influence in it, maybe not. It's hard to determine the Walt Dawn style compared to the C.H. Greenblatt style or the Aaron Springer style. But this is a pretty good episode. Not my favorite, it's not super good, but there are some fun things about it. I'll say that much. It was originally called Working Pearl, which is a play on words, and it's still called that in some TV guides, and honestly, I think that's a way better name for this episode, because with Bossy Boots, it sounds too much like Squeaky Boots, another Krusty Krab episode with Pearl in it, and in this episode, Pearl isn't really being bossy, SpongeBob isn't being bossy, Mr. Krabs isn't. It's a pun, but it doesn't really work and doesn't really describe the episode. Maybe just calling it the Cuddly Crab would have been fun. Fine enough. Really, the biggest shame about this episode isn't really its title, it's more the fact that they don't get new spatulas. I mean, SpongeBob gets some new spatulas over time. He almost got a gold spatula, he got lay spatula, he got that plankton spatula. This episode is the genesis for a couple plot structures, because I think this is the first time the Krusty Krab is remodeled, refurbished, renovated. And they don't tend to be my favorite episodes, but I totally get why they do them. I mean, of course, it was touched up for the Halloween party, and everything was chrome in the future. But this sort of sets a precedent for exactly how they function from here on out. Add a gimmick. The Krusty Sponge, Krabby-O Mondays, the Homina Homina thing from Squilliam Returns. My question of the week is based around it. And as I've said before in episodes like The Chaperone, Steven Hillenburg really liked Pearl and really tried getting some Pearl episodes in there. And, you know, good on him. Pearl was a character that deserved a lot better, and has gotten a lot better. Well, not a whole lot better, but has had a little more development than other SpongeBob characters since the movie and all. And as for the touch-ups they make to this episode, it's mostly about making it more cutesy and cuddly and colourful. They should have called it the colourful crab, not the cutesy or cuddly crab. Though, maybe my favourite joke in the episode is all the different names that SpongeBob rattles off. Don't know exactly how they would have worked out. Maybe they still have ideas for them. Maybe SpongeBob still has that idea for mustaches. That might have foreshadowed the movie, actually. Also, for some reason, there's a human skeleton in there for that shot. Don't know exactly why that's there. And rewatching this episode made me realize that Pearl's voice wasn't very nasally back then. I think Laurie Allen really played that up over time. And this was also the start of when Mr. Krabs' voice started to get a little higher. Don't know if that's the best thing in the world. I do really like his deep, authoritative voice in the early years. But what can you do? Actors are fine with certain inflections that are easier to think up. But my favourite thing about this episode overall is probably the cuddly crab aesthetic that we're just about to see. There we are, love hearts and stars. I don't know, it adds this whole identity to the episode, but even this is kind of odd, because this is supposed to be a teen hangout, and I don't know about you, but teenage girls aren't really super attracted to, like, pinks and purples and yellows and rainbows and sunshine and love when they're like 15 or 16 like Pearl is. She's 15 at this point. This is a part that I like and can kind of understand, especially with the angle later on that they reveal about Pearl. And now, around halfway through the episode, or maybe a little over halfway through the episode, the conflict arises. It's odd that they save the conflict for the Slash, but hey, gotta form a bond with Pearl and all. So, SpongeBob doesn't know how to make a salad, which is just a Krabby Patty but without the buns and the meat. I think that meat is in some salads, and there is certainly some salads that have bread in them. I definitely like how Pearl pronounces it as salad. So weird. Maybe it was like a teen thing in the 90s and early 2000s. Who knows? Something about this episode is that it's also the first time the Krabby Patties and their brand are really put on the line, but it isn't because of some evil business corporation or some gimmick the Chum Bucket's doing or anything, or some gimmick the Krusty Krab is doing or anything. It's just because Pearl's messing with things. Kind of a quaint start, don't you think? He just wants salads and tea. And that's another thing. The Krusty Krab did have a salad bar back in Culture Shock, and one of my friends asked me about this. How come they had a salad bar in Culture Shock, and then later on, in Bossy Boots, it's apparently the first time they have salads? And I had to explain to them that SpongeBob doesn't have continuity, or at least didn't for the longest time. They just did whatever was funny. Like SpongeBob being in this cuddly crab suit that we never see again, and is apparently the most embarrassing thing ever. Also, I like how Squidward's just out of this episode now. He was the first sign that things aren't going too well, and now he's just gone. So, I can file salads under the shoelace paradox, I can call it. I like it when little things in animated shows are filed under names like that, like badger plots, manatee jokes. I'm adding shoelace paradoxes or shoelace plot holes to the mix. If you don't know what that means, look at last week's video. And even Mr. Krabs is catching on to the fact that the cuddly crab being so cuddly isn't good for business, but I don't remember if it's because it just isn't attracting customers anymore, because we don't see a decline in profits and customers. We just see all this junk surrounding Mr. Krabs that SpongeBob eventually buys that was potentially pretty expensive. I mean, again, I think this episode's fine, but it's not really one that you have to look too deep into to enjoy. And then we're getting to the part of the episode where it's potentially the bossiest, but not really. It's kind of playing with bossiness. Again, Bossy Boots is kind of a dumb title. And that's with SpongeBob discovering, while firing Pearl, that she was just sabotaging the Krusty Krab because she didn't want to be there. She didn't want to be a manager of the place. And it's cutting into her social life. We don't exactly see Pearl losing her friends, though. Maybe I'm just looking at this with too much of a modern or analytical lens. I mean, this episode's completely fine when it's just you're watching this from SpongeBob's point of view, and it's especially funny if you're looking at it from Squidward's point of view, but with Mr. Krabs and Pearl, it falls apart a bit, honestly. And the sending is kind of slow, but at least it makes sense. At least it ties things together in a nice little cuddly crab bow. And I think that Pearl is pretty likable at the end here. She explains to SpongeBob like he's her boss, and that's very nice. And I think that Mr. Krabs' characterization is starting to get a little exaggerated, like his love of money is getting in the way of his health. Like, he needs to be resuscitated with the smell of a $20 bill, I think it was. But still, pretty funny. As is SpongeBob having to take all the Cuddly Crab merchandise away in exchange for a year's salary. Which is probably the reason SpongeBob reveals to Patrick that he's losing money in Big Pink Loser next week. But more on that in a bit. So yeah, I think that this episode's alright. There's problems here and there, but it is a pretty funny episode. A lot of good little quips like Squidward's thing about the Krusty Krab being a bad name for a bad restaurant, therefore it should be left alone. Plus, I think that the aesthetic is one of the best things about the episode, if not the best thing about it, even if it is a little flawed in terms of its context. But yeah, this is in my okay category of episodes. And that is Season 2, Episode 2, Something Smells in Bossy Boots. My question of the week for you last week was, do you prefer the traditional or digital look for SpongeBob? And I got the unanimous consensus that people love the digital look more. Jack McGinn adds, although I'm mainly referring to Season 9 onward. Cartman TV says that the traditional nature look looks more naturist, I think, but the digital look is more polished and colourful. A Rail System says that too, and Super Seal says it's more colourful and clean. My question of the week for you this week is, what's your favourite Krusty Krab renovation? There have been a lot over the years, but my money's on the fancy restaurant that they make in Squilliam Returns, which itself returns an enemy in-law, oddly enough. Join me next week as I talk about Big Pink Loser and Bubble Buddy, episodes about incompetent or reckless friends of SpongeBob's. This should be fun. Goodbye for now.